So now moving forward to the next steps again. So I'm very happy that we welcome Laura Herman today.
Thank you, Virginie. Good morning, everybody.
So you will remember that Lara was with us at one of the pre-webinar where it was about what were your expectations, what Lara had as expectation before coming to the summer school last year, and then what has happened, how this new knowledge, new skills that you hopefully gained during that week is going to influence the way you are engaged yourself. So that's what we want to do in this last let's say hour and a half in total, if I from the next session, to see how you can leverage what you've learned during the week. So I will start with really one short slide, and then I'll pass the floor to Lara to continue and interact with you all, also building on the case story that you have sent to us. So my only one slide, in fact, what I have done is a little exercise on this discussion you had at this webinar. I think it was the second webinar before the summer school. And we had asked you to put in Google Docs, what were your expectations, what you were willing to retain from this course. So I've grouped, in fact, your expectation in one single slide, and I thought that I will share it again so that you can check, like kind of as a checklist for yourself, whether you think you have achieved at least part of what you were coming from for. So what you had told us was that you were here to learn, of course, get information on rare disease, on research, on clinical trials, clinical studies, on how the institution can facilitate or grant research, on data collection, and how to also handle those data, on the process for off-label medicine, on health technology assessments. That was one big chunk of what you were expecting. Then you were here to understand about medicine development process, but also about how to really broaden the patient perspective, to have better insight on patient engagement, on patient partnership. Then the third point, you mentioned exchange. So exchange among stakeholders that are involved in the medicine development, and I hope we pass it on to you, this message that therapeutic development is really multi-stakeholder faceted. You also wanted to connect one to each other, between patients, between different stakeholders, learn from experience and gain some insights and tips. Then some of you had mentioned the purpose of being engaged and of doing what you are doing, which is to make the life of the patient better, to provide support, and to improve, in the end, quality of life of the patients. You were seeking for how to do things, so how to be more involved at European level as a patient, how to build the capacities as well of your own organization, overall how to be better equipped as an advocate, and for some of you that are not necessarily patient representative, also how to be a better professional in your respective areas. And finally, also what we hope we have helped to enable is the know-how. So more than only acquiring knowledge, more than only getting information, but also learning on how to apply. So how to do with what you know. For example, to help in some of the steps towards treatment, or to lead all the steps as we have seen this morning with Nick. How, for example, to create or to get involved in a CAB, how to manage the interaction with all the different experts, in particular, for example, how to be involved in regulatory decision-making processes. So here it is. I'm not even invented anything. That was what you had expressed yourself. So I hope it brings back some reflection as well. And now I want to pass the floor to Lara to continue. Maybe Lara, you also have one or two reflections around what was expressed in the past by our participants, and otherwise I'll let you continue.
Okay, thank you very much, Virginie, and good morning to all of you. I hope that this week has been very rich in learning and exchanging and making network connection between all of you, because this is in fact the, how can I say, the summary of the week, the main point. I remember last year when I was at the summer school, I wanted to learn a lot of things, and this is very important, but connection is very important too. So I get your point, Virginie, and I encourage everybody to keep in touch one another, to make things go farther and faster. With the summer school team, we would like to share with you a couple of case stories that some of you has sent to the team before the training, and we think that going through these case stories is really very interesting, because they show, they give real example of how things work in the real life. And they shows as well the, how can I say, the engagement of people like you and me in making things go faster if possible. So if you're okay with it, I give the floor to Magdalena, who has been involved in personal and professional exchanges with pharmaceutical companies, and probably her experience will give us some details and some important information on how things can be worked together. So Magdalena, if you are okay.
Lara, sorry to interrupt, because I think that Magdalena had to step out, in fact, right? Tamara, she will come back?
Probably later.
Yes, she should be back at around 12 o'clock.
Okay, so I give the floor.
So we can pick up on her story later.
No problem, no problem. So if I'm not wrong, I give the floor to Cinzia from Italy, because she may explain how she managed to identify the good clinical trial sites in her country, and how she connected to clinicians with the pharmaceutical companies for her rare disease.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the story started in 2019 when I had the choice to go to Baltimore for the gathering dedicated to SCN8A organized by the American Foundation. And there I had the chance to meet in person representatives from the two pharmaceutical companies that were at the time working on small molecules quite specific to block the SCN8A encodes sodium channel. Then once back, I was put in contact by our neurologist in Milano to the main research team that we have in Europe, that is in Denmark. So it is a team of geneticists and clinicians working specifically on genetic epilepsies and very, very interested in SCN8A. In fact, last year, the first ever international natural history study was kicked off, and the leading center is, of course, the Danish, is the Diana Lund Epilepsy Center. In the meanwhile, I met also I put on the fly. Sorry, because I don't know how to put it. Okay. Then in the meanwhile, I also in Baltimore, I met some European advocates, in particular from UK, that was in Europe at the time, but we don't mind about Brexit actually, and Germany. And so we start connecting families all around Europe. And when the the company that is actually now is already started the phase 2 of the clinical trial in the United States, asked to the American advocate, which because they don't have any branch in Europe. They of course decided to work with the CRO in Europe, European based, but they wanted also to know from families which clinicians, which hospitals were the most expert in SCN8A, or at least they, hospitals that actually were treating patients with SCN8A. So we put together the families, we asked to many families, and so the pharmaceutical companies was able to cross data from the CRO based in Europe with the input from families. And then they decided to collect all the data and then to decide where to open a clinical trial. Then there was also another interesting thing because, for example, the consultants, the clinicians that were consulting the pharmaceutical company about how many clinical sites to open in Europe, but also in the United States, were quite pretty sure that it would be the best thing to open very few sites because they don't want to, because in this case would be much more control, but the input from families was that with this such a devastating disorder, it would be very, very difficult to travel across countries. So if, for example, and also to leave siblings at home, even because the pivotal phase will last about 5 months, and means actually 3 times per month visit face-to-face to the site. And so the pharmaceutical company decided also to open more clinical sites in the United States, but also in Europe. And so that was more or less the story. I have also to say that the first compound that now is in clinical trial was developed by another company. They did all the chemical and the preclinical studies, also the phase 1. And at that time, they also decided to have a survey with families that was managed by the American Foundation only for English-speaking countries, so just Australia, United States, Canada, and UK. To understand how to design in a better way, in the best way, the clinical trials. So which endpoints are important for families, which are the tricky points, and so on. So I have to say that, yeah, our was quite, let's say, yeah, it was an effort to the pharmaceutical company. I don't know actually how much they take into consideration, information, but they were really eager to know about families in Europe. And so this is more or less the story.
Cinzia, I've got a question. When you're talking about clinical sites, you're talking about sites where how can I say, the clinician make generally a follow-up of the patients, or very specific clinical sites for the clinical trials, or both? I don't know. Can you please?
Understanding what, because the clinical trial in Europe is not started yet, but it is where actually the clinical sites the clinical trial will take place. So for example, in Italy, we have at least, and we were really surprised, 3 hospitals that we lead in the clinical trial, and each of them has received protocols. Then what I will say by the clinicians is that what the pharmaceutical companies, also the CRO, wants to do is put in competition the ethics committees of the hospitals. So the ethics committees that will be faster in the approval of the protocol, then will become the leading clinical site. So where the clinical trial actually will happen in Italy. So not 3, but 1. And yeah.
Okay. And do you know how many people will be concerned by the possible clinical trials?
Actually, the bilateral study, so this first phase will enroll 54 patients all around the world, and we split it in 2 arms, so placebo, and so it's a placebo control, and with a limited a range of age, so just from 2 and 21. So this is the target with very specific criteria that they have to meet, of course. So it's not so many. So we expect that probably, okay, they are open so many clinical trials because they don't expect that all they will run effectively and actually at the end.
So if I understand correctly, in fact, the key point of all your case story, let's say, is that you make connection with organizations or families all around Europe in order to have a sort of map of clinical sites available and capable of leading the clinical trials.
Yeah. And this was possible because we have actually an international Facebook group, because it is a private group that is managed by the American Foundation. And then because we have a very active parent based in Germany that speaks like 5 or 6 languages, is very active with families, very supportive, and this is why we were able to, because consider that in 2019, the only foundation, the only organization, the patient organization was the American one. Then in 2020, we started in Italy, and then the year after also in the UK, and now there are many other organizations in Europe that are going to be registered. And yeah, so it was all volunteer work that we did actually, and with a good connection. We are a very small community because consider that we are more or less 500 patients all around the world, so not so much. And we tend also to be connected by country, even because of course there is the language barrier for many.
And do you have a sort of federation or European alliance?
We plan to, yeah.
Organizations?
Yeah, we plan that, and actually recently joined the nightmare group, let's say, of this diagnosis, a very active mom from Netherlands, so based in Amsterdam. And so we're discussing a lot about this, because I met an Angelman syndrome mom at the pre-course, and she advised me that it would be very, very important to have a European alliance. So now we're working on, we're trying to understand how to do that, who is going to be involved, and But now, for example, we have the organization, a CNAT organization in France, already registered. In Spain, Portugal will be next, and also Netherlands is in the process, and UK, Ireland together already registered, and Italy. And I hope many other, because we need also to spread awareness about this very, very rare disease. Yeah.
Good work, let's say. Do you have any recommendation or suggestions for your fellow or the summer school, to help in any way to get through, in order to make connections, to get in touch with pharmaceutical companies, whatever can help?
Yeah, I have to say that the COVID period didn't help, because it's very important, I think, to meet in face-to-face, because when you meet face-to-face, lots of things can happen. So, for example, the Baltimore experience was great, because actually we had a lot of a chat at the bars, because they used to just chat during drinking, while drinking, and it was amazing because we could also, speak a little bit, not like a pharmaceutical company here and a poor patient here, but just almost at the same level, and we share a lot, and lots of barriers just go down when you speak with it's a very casual setting, and Yeah, and the other thing is also if you can create a supportive group, this would help a lot, because especially I mean, yeah, it's very helpful for newly diagnosed families that are just jumped into a nightmare from I mean, yeah, because it's quite, I mean, not similar, but it was a neurological disorder. It is very important. Sometimes the newly diagnosed families have the power and the motivation to drive a change, while the families that are in this, I mean, have been in this from a long time, sometimes they are really frustrated, and they just give up hope, and they say, okay, I don't want to do anything, because nothing will going to change. So yeah, what I saw is that newly diagnosed families are the most motivated. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Cinzia.
Welcome.
Any question, any suggestion? I don't see any question coming in. Tamara, please help me, because I don't see everybody in the pictures, in the little pictures.
So far, we have no comments or questions on the chat, or no one raised their hand, but please, if you want to contribute, it's a session for all of you, so feel free.
Can I ask a quick question for Cinzia? When I think earlier in the week, we heard that sometimes the quality of a clinical trial is dependent on the experience of the clinicians running the trial and the infrastructure of the hospital. And so when it sounds like there are quite a lot of clinical trial centers being set up in Europe for a relatively small number of patients, is that, and I can understand why from the parents' point of view and the burden of the trial, that would be really beneficial, but has any thought been given as to, I suppose, the experience of those centers in running a clinical trial, and has it been difficult to get the buy-in from those neurologists, those centers, to actually run the clinical trial? Because obviously there's quite a lot of hospital infrastructure that needs, and the ethics committee and all of those things that needs to be involved.
Sorry. Yeah, actually, this was the concern of the consultant of the pharmaceutical company. At the top from the Danish team, they were, I mean, warned that this would create a lot of bias. We have to say that the main endpoint of the clinical trial in this phase will be the number of seizures, or how seizures will change from baseline and the motor seizures in total. So if the bias would be, I don't know, how to identify seizures, classify seizures, this is a tonic or atonic or tonic-clonic. In this phase of the pivotal trial doesn't matter a lot, because they just want to know if there is a difference in motor seizures from baseline and with the treatments or not. But this was the most concern of the Danish team. In fact, they pushed a lot for telemedicine, because yeah, lots of things could be with telemedicine, and reduce the number of visits face to face.
And so is there telemedicine, or was that decided against, to use telemedicine?
They decided to have just, for example, this is Aaron that is screaming out, this my little child. And no, actually they decided, for example, to, I don't know, free visit face to face during 1 month, and one with telemedicine, but it's still a lot. So if I have to move, for example, from Italy to Denmark 3 times in a month, it's really time consuming. It's very difficult. It would be very difficult for me. So I don't know now, but the trial just started in the United States 2 months ago, and we don't know actually anything from families at the moment. So we don't know how it's going, and we just have a hope, because without this trial, we're just, I mean, much more at the on the horizon for the moment.
If I could just ask one other question, and again, sorry, this is maybe me being a bit confused, and this is probably a more general question, because we talked about having interactions with pharmaceutical companies and then how you can interact with the EMA, because Cynthia has been involved with discussing with the pharmaceutical companies, does that then mean that if it came to trying to authorize this medication in Italy, Cynthia would not be able to interact with the EMA about that?
Yeah, this is a good point, but I didn't know all this. Since last year before the Aurora course. So I don't know. I hope there will be someone else that could lead this discussion with the EMA and yeah.
But it's hard, isn't it? Because you're a small group and you're driving it. So if you can't interact with the pharmaceutical company and get the ball rolling, and then you're in a position then when you can't interact with the regulators.
Yeah, I've just realized now, during this week, actually, when Maria Mavris had a talk about and I say, okay, now I have to understand how to do that. But yeah, since last week, I didn't know actually. I'm really naive, I have to say. I'm just learning by doing, and so yeah, we figured out how to do actually.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if I just may add, and indeed you are doing a great job. So I think there is nothing to regret. I mean, you had a very huge impact so far. So it was very good that you made that choice to be involved in this development. Just indeed, like, you cannot be involved to the extent that was presented by Maria, but there is always ways. So if at some point the EMA is looking for experts in your disease and they are presented with a very small population, when they do not have like someone that is completely free from conflict, as long as they know, they will be able to maybe still have a discussion with you. So there is this can't remember if it was Maria or Maria who had talked about expert witness, for example. That is, in fact, when EMA has no choice than involving a patient that has had some interaction with developers, then they use this expert witness. And it means that you won't have access to maybe all the discussion, all the dossier. You cannot be present for all the discussion, but still you will be able to give your input anyway. So it's a mitigation measure. And Maria, you want to add anything on that?
No, thank you, Virginia. I was just wanting to add about this the expert witness, but also to let you know that the protocol assistance or scientific advice is the most restrictive activity. But you have other activities, and Maria presented, and Natalie, other ways of engagement that are less restrictive and where you can also take place. So it's true that in your case, and just you have a direct interest, you may not be able to participate in a scientific advice or protocol assistance, but maybe in another type of activities you could. And also, if at some point another company could come for the same disease, you could be involved even if you have been involved in with another company, because will be kind of indirect interest. But it's, as Virginie mentioned, is really always individual cases, and depending on the situation, we could look, on your specific case and see how we could manage. But as a mitigation measure, and what we explained the other day, it's good to have, when possible, these two people or different people engaging with different stakeholders in order to avoid this kind of situations. But great job, and congratulations, Cynthia.
Thank you.
If I can add something about our experience in Angelman syndrome in France, we try to share our engagements, and so people who is involved in CAB are not involved, for instance, in EMA discussions. But we can do that because we are, 2 or 3 people. If in our organization there is just one people who, because the disease is very rare, ultra rare or whatever, it becomes very difficult. And I think that EMA is aware of this and can modulate, in fact, the eligibility of people going to the different commissions and discussions.
Yeah, but sorry, I have a question. What about, because there is actually another American company that is in the, I mean, they are completing the phase 1. This is another small molecule with a different mechanism of action, actually working on a specific on 2A and 8A, so not just SCN8A, but also another similar mutation. And I expect that in future, because I have already contacted this other company, they'll come, of course, to ask about you, because it is both these companies, they don't have any branch in Europe. So is this also a case that I can't interact with the EMA, because in this case there are 2 companies, not just one? No.
Maria, I was going to give you the floor because it was one of the, also I think one of the case you presented in the quiz, when you have 2 companies and what choices are presented to you.
I'm not sure if I understood, Cynthia, if you are involved with the 2 of them as well, or
not at the moment, just with the second one, just with the leader of the patient engagement, just for I mean, asking money, asking funding to the pharmaceutical company from some activities that we were leading here in Italy, but also in Europe, not directly talking about a clinical trial. But I expect that probably I'll be involved in future, because the phase 1 is going to, I mean, to be completed, and so I don't know if next year or in 2 years they start the phase 2.
Well, in this case, as I don't know, this is your personal choice as well, but in this case, I might suggest you to continue being yourself involved with companies, and then another one of your group that has not been already in touch with any, to be kind of free for the regulators. But then another thought would be, and I don't know if you have thought about it, is to set up a CAP, a community advisory board, because if there are several companies, I don't know, and that's another option. Of course, then you would be also the same person there, because then you would be conflicted, but that would be my suggestion. But I'm happy to have another chat with you, Cynthia, if you would like.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I see Ruth.
Yes, I'm still a bit confused. I asked this question before. So Esther and I are addressed by a company, and it's our first chance to get a treatment, or to develop a treatment, and we thought it would be very important to get involved as a patient representative, to say what is important for the patients. But then during the summer school, we were told it's not so good to be involved with pharmaceutical industry, because then you can't be involved with EMA. So I'm still a bit confused. Should we try to continue to or not to start to talk with the pharmaceutical industry or not? So I'm really a bit, I don't know what to do.
There is no right and wrong answer, Ruth, I'm afraid. That's why it's, I mean, what we try to provide you is the options, and also be mindful of the consequences of your choice, but really like whether or not you should or you shouldn't, or where you would have the maximum of impact. That is purely your choice, because I mean, and that's why I'm saying there is no right or wrong answer, is that it's not bad to interact with company, or it's not better to interact with regulator. It's really depending on cases, depending on also your resources, how the interaction might go. If you have, as Maria was saying, the possibility to have some people that are only talking to industry and some that are only talking with regulator or HTA, but we can discuss, of course, so we can discuss a bit more in depth for each cases, but the choice has really to come from you and your community. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
But we can discuss. I mean, if you want to contact us as well after, it will be a pleasure to discuss a bit more in depth.
Okay, thanks.
Any other question or advice or suggestions? If there is no more question, I'm just checking with Tamara if Marlene is in.
Yes, I see Marlene here.
Oh,
Smiling.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tamara. So I give the floor to Marlene if she's okay, because she is a young researcher and working on rare and ultra rare diseases. And I would ask Marlene to tell us more about her experience with EMA as a researcher working on possible solution for rare diseases.
Yes, thank you very much. I will talk about EMA in a minute, but I think I have to give a little bit of an introduction why I interact with EMA and how this came about. So I think we have heard a lot now that as patient advocates or patients directly can interact with EMA and that companies can interact with EMA, but why would researchers want to interact with EMA? And this comes a little bit back down to where do actually all the therapies come from? So they're not necessarily developed in pharmaceutical companies, but they often come from research labs all over the world, and pharmaceutical companies pick up on them because they have some potential to gain them financial benefit. And they then take them, start producing them, and they finance the clinical trials, which are very, very expensive. But they will only do that if there's enough patients in the world and if they see that they have a gain out of it. So what happens now, if there's only 5 patients in the world or only 1 patient in the world, will there ever be a company who's interested to pick up on a new idea and actually go for the clinical trials that cost millions to maybe treat 5 people in the world? And well, then they would have to make a $10 million drug to get the money back, but no one will pay for it. So there's kind of a little bit of a loophole, because the people that develop those drugs in the labs, they can actually also provide them to the patients in university medical centers. Just many people don't know about it. And this is how we come in. So we are a center that is academia based. We're a nonprofit. We're not gaining anything from making those drugs, but there's this large unmet medical need of many, many people in the world that are the single only patients. And they also deserve their chance at getting a proper treatment. And the first such treatment for a single patient was actually published in 2019. And by now we have like 5 patients treated worldwide. So it's not many, but there's more and more of these programs all over the world now. And there's one in the Netherlands, but there's one combining several centers in Europe. So that's one mutational medicine. And then there's the Enophon Collaborative worldwide. And we do go to talk to the regulators because, again, there's this gray zone and no one knows what to do. There's no proper regulations at the moment, and there's no structure to do these therapies. And also doing N-of-1 clinical trials is not really worth it because there's no control group, because the patient is their own control group. And this is how we went to EMA, because we wanted to know how to do this. What are the regulations and what do we have to take care of? Because again, we can't do proper toxicology studies, safety pharmacology studies. We can't do dose escalation studies. We only have 1 patient, maybe 2 or 5 if we are lucky, and there's lots of patients with a certain disease. So what we actually are aiming for now is doing a named patient setting. So I think you have heard about this morning. So there's off-label use, there's compassionate use, but there's this named patient setting where you have a new drug, an investigational drug that has not been used on any person in the world, and you have to have a clinician to sign off on it, and then really the responsibilities with the clinician in the hospital. So this is very tricky, because if it goes wrong, they can be responsible for it. You can technically sue them for well, giving a patient the wrong treatment. So we went to EMA, and EMA said, well, we don't have to talk to them because it's a named patient setting, and we could just technically do what we please and give it to the patient. But we did not feel that was a good option, and we didn't feel safe of doing that. And we had 2 different meetings with them. So we first had a innovation task force meeting. So these are experts that they call in from all over the member states, and they ask to give you some advice. So you hand in like a portfolio, you explain what you're trying to do, and they really give you some ideas how to go about designing those drugs, what preclinical studies should you do, how can you still do some toxicology and safety pharmacology, like what options are there to still be safe, how should the drug be produced, in what setting should it be given to the patient, and how should you control for any adverse events. And the other thing we had was a scientific advice meeting, also with many experts from EMA, where they also give us some input. And my experience was truly, truly positive. So I think Nick this morning already said it, and it was really good, because I was afraid these are regulators, they only like data, and they will go against us proposing these N-of-1 treatments, but they were thinking with us amazingly along. They gave us great input, they had amazing ideas, they really understood the need, and they are in favor of doing this. And I think they will literally watch us the next 2 years, how it's going. And we got great feedback. So they gave us input, what we can do, what we can't do. Normally you're required to have multiple in animal trials, and we don't have to do this because this takes months to years. We don't have that time for single patients. So they are very progressive diseases. They normally only have 1 year to 2 until we can treat them. So we are allowed to do a reduced study. We work directly with patient cells. So we really work on the target cells, so to say, and they say if we can show some studies that it's safe in the cells, that it really has the effect we want, that is fine. And we have to monitor our patients very, very carefully before the trial, so to see how they are doing, and once they start getting the drug, how they progress from there. But generally a truly positive experience from my side. They were really helpful on all the levels. They really want this to work. So this was quite clear, and they gave us amazing input, and we want to go back to them in the next 2 years if things are moving forward, because at the moment they say N-of-1, but what if it is N-of-5 or N-of-10, still doing a clinical trial in these small patient groups? Is this really worth it? And we are talking with them, and I mean, I'm not allowed to say that, but I secretly hope that we can change a little bit the way they are seeing this, and that for small groups, we really get to do this faster, don't have to do all the authorization process and go through all of this, because it's taking too long for the patients to start working. Yeah, I think that was my experience.
Thank you very much, Marlene, for your wonderful feedback. Very encouraging. And any question, any reaction to Marlene's feedback? No?
Well, I think it's a very valid approach for ultra-rare diseases. So I see now our hands are coming, because we do have some representative.
Yes, I see Elena. Elena, if you want to join in.
Yes, it's also Elena. Marlene, you said what you also wrote before in the chat, that clinicians are liable, but I wasn't even pointing that out. If you find the doctors that they want to have this risk and you apply for it, even though then there is a lot of problems getting it, they ask for more literature. And you say, of course, if there was more literature, more clinical trials, I won't be applying for a off-label use because the marketing authorization way would have been done, or we are going to do a group. So it's like a little bit the tail thing. So you ask for compassionate for off-label use or compassionate, and they ask for more literature, but you need that. If you cannot try it, you cannot deliver. So it's like a little bit difficult. It's not just finding the doctors, which sometimes happens. It's once you find them to get that afterwards, what is taking really long for many.
Yeah, so I completely understand, and I completely get the point of view. I think from a doctor point of view, it's just a huge risk. You can lose your license, right? So you put your name out there, you sign these documents, and you are really reliable as yourself. Or if you're lucky, you have a contract and then the hospital is reliable. And there's like two things that happen now. It works, great press release for the hospital. It doesn't work, you are in big trouble. And this is the problem, why this is not done so often. And in our case, we really do extensive studies beforehand, and we take the clinicians along the moment we recruit the patient. So they are there. We have independent clinical treatment boards, and they are here to make that decision. And they know at the end of the day, we produce the drug, we design the drug, we deliver it to them as the center, but they administer it, and it's their responsibility. And I understand from a medical doctor point of view, this is high risk. And that's why often they don't want to do it. In our case, it's a little bit different because they are along the kind of development of the drug. They see what we are doing, they get the data. What you're talking about is having other drugs that are out there that you want to have as a named patient use or like delivery. Yeah, very tricky to find a doctor that is willing to undergo that risk. I'm really sorry, but it's just they're protecting themselves first here.
But even when you find a doctor for that, then you have the hurdle with the insurance. So it's
yeah, insurances don't pay our treatments. No. No, they don't. So it's crowdfunding. It's funding from the European Union, from the hospitals, or from the families directly. That's true. That's not reimbursed, and we are discussing, at least for the trials or for the drugs we do, to get reimbursement every time one works. So we get one to the patient, it works. We get this one reimbursed to treat the next patient. But this is all being discussed every single case. Unfortunately, it's not reimbursed.
Thank you very much. I saw Magdalena with her hand up.
I'm good. Thank you. For once, it was addressed and and answered. Thank you.
Okay, but Magdalena, you have the floor, and you keep it if you agree, because we are very close to the end of this session, and I would like you to tell us what this week of session brought to you, and what you learned, and what will be useful for you in real life from Monday on, if you agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I think the sentence that I will put on social media is that this week and everything that happened in preparation to this week has been professionally transformative for me, and I truly mean it. It's been a huge learning. I think addressing a lot of issues and putting them into a real life scenario and exercising and digging deeper with some of the peers. I think I want to recognize obviously the team of Eurordis and all the facilitators and speakers, but I think a great appreciation goes to people who are here as participants, because I've learned a great deal from you guys. I was just typing Marlene specifically with a request, and so it's been great. I still want to think a lot about what has happened in our community, FH Europe. I mentioned that the therapies exist. We are in a slightly different area, both for the rare forms and then the sort of more common forms. But this training has given me courage and empowered me to have a different set of questions and not to maybe shy away from being a little bit more constructively critical towards some of the stakeholders, anything from medical community and societies when it comes to recommendations and guidelines to regulators, but also to the pharma industry. So I really wanted to say thank you. It's been a great opportunity, and I will make sure that everyone in our community understands the value and applies moving forward.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. Is there any other question or advice or suggestion? Otherwise, I give the floor back to Tamara, Virginie, to close the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone. And thank you, Lara. It was a pleasure to have you, and it was a pleasure to have you in the program committee the whole year.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me to be with you all and to take part to this very, very interesting exchanges of opinion and advices. You're doing all a great job, and go on like that, because you are great. Everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.